the University of Manchester. He wanted so badly to be here, but the whole COVID situation made it impossible for him to travel from England. So he has been, joining us virtually as well. So I just want to mention a couple of things that have been happening around sort of planning for this event that's kind of behind the scenes. And one has involved Emily Sangalo, the bibliographer, the African Studies bibliographer here. The family worked with her to facilitate donations of my dad's book collections after he passed away. She came over to his apartment in Capitol Lakes and cataloged and packed up all of his enormous political science and African studies book collection. And the idea was she wanted to bring it over to the University of Kinshasa. But then COVID happened and everything shut down, and she kept coming up with these new plans, and then they would fall apart, and then there was another plan and it would fall apart. But then finally, kind of miraculously, last December, she got Aliko to carry 13 boxes of books as excess luggage over on the airplane to Kinshasa. And this was like such an amazing feat. Only Emily would figure out how to do that. So we call that, so she's documenting this with all her photographs. And so we're calling it The Adventures of Crawford's Books. And I think it's such a lovely story for me and for my sisters, because, she's bringing these books back to Kinshasa, which was the place that kind of started everything for my dad. And, his time, he had been going to do some dissertation on the Popish plots in England. And then he made this wild U-turn and decided to study decolonization and revolution in Africa. And, he met, I think he's when he was in Belgium, he met these student activists, and it fired up his imagination. And then he went and spent time in Congo, and that really sort of set his career path. So I think it's lovely that the books are going back there. I think that's just such a wonderful kind of circling back. So I also want to mention the work that has been done to kind of create this archive of my father's papers. And my older sister Eva, has been working really hard on that, sort of figuring out that the archives actually wanted some of these papers. I was about to pitch them in the garbage, actually. And I'm a historian, I just thought all the good stuff had already been donated. And she was like, well, no, I don't think so. Maybe we should ask. And she was quite persistent. And sure enough, Katie Nash said, yeah, we really want to have all of the research notes and so on. So, Eve cataloged them and packed them off, and Katie Nash has them. And if any of you have, anything that records or even, emails, I know if you're like me, your file system is like inbox, and it's just so you can search Crawford Young, and emails from 10 years ago pop up. So maybe you can find some interesting emails or records of your time with him. I think that the archives would be really interested in all that stuff. So I just want to I'm not going to talk very much longer, but I wanted to say two more things to everybody. And one is that, when I sort of look out at all of you, and I imagine looking at you kind of through my dad's eyes, I think he would have just been so happy, and maybe he is watching us, and he's so happy to see everybody together. He would just be bursting with pride to see all of you. He felt incredibly fortunate. He always was very grateful for having the opportunity to have a job that he loved doing. He talked about that a lot. He loved working for the University of Wisconsin. He just thought it was a great institution. And he felt lucky to work for a place that he believed in. He loved public education, the mission, the Wisconsin idea, all of that. He was just a true believer. And he really liked all aspects. Not very many people can say, "Oh, I love all aspects of my job." He loved the research, he loved the teaching, and he even loved the administration. He loved all that stuff. But he especially loved his students, and when I looked at the list of names of the people that were speaking today and then are on the program tomorrow. I mean, I know so many of these names. I know these names because he talked about you guys. He talked about you guys at the dinner table. He talked about you guys, when I would be chatting with him. He told me stories, maybe even a little gossip here and there. So he really cared about you, and so we all feel kind of like we know you too. And he just was so proud of all of his students and all of your wonderful, impressive accomplishments. And then the final thing I just want to say is that, and several people have mentioned the last project that my dad worked on, which was this biography of my mom. And my mom really, she was the love of his life, and during that book, I think, just really helped him get through what were some difficulties in his last years. She passed on in 2008, and he just never really got over that in some ways. And Mike Schatzberg actually suggested, why don't you, he was worried about my dad getting over my mom, and he said, why don't you write a book about her? And that was such a great idea. It was really inspired, and so he worked on that biography, and he had some struggles with his health, the last few years of his life, and kind of coming back to that book really kept him going. It really kept him motivated to keep trying. So I thought that was so the book was really great in that way. And as he had a final draft, and then he actually had myself and my sisters read it over. So we did a kind of like a book workshop for my dad. It was really fun, So we're reading the book, and then we're coming up with and we all had the same reaction to it, which was like, this is a biography of Becky, and it's like, well, no, and we kind of gently said, well, Dad, maybe you might want to change the title to like a biography of a marriage, because there was so much of him in this book. I mean. And he said, well, no, I had to put that in to explain, why this was happening to her. Right. But it really was about both of them. And he never did a memoir himself, but that is kind of a shadow memoir, really. And it's just I think, a really nice kind of portrait of their life together, the way their careers, they built a life around their joint careers, and it's actually a kind of wonderful social history of Madison in a way, and from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and what was sort of possible for a certain class of people. The middle class academic, and she was in a lot of ways typical of the academic wives of her generation, and sort of some of the what was possible and what was not possible, and at what time did new things become possible. So I hope that you will pick up copies. I think there's a few left, and I just want to say thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you really enjoy the rest of this evening and the talks that we have planned for tomorrow. So thank you so much.